Intrusional, and we're talking about remote and synchronous learning.
Okay, good afternoon, trustees. Before we get into the reviewing the report and the presentation by Krista and Mitch, our administrators of our remote learning classes, I do want to share a quote from Andy Hargreaves. Andy Hargreaves is an educational researcher, and he recently, in a webinar, in addressing some of the challenges that we are currently faced with, he cautioned folks that we shouldn't be looking to compare virtual to in-person, because he said you will always be disappointed. Just recognize that it is different. I think that's a mindset that is helpful for us as we start looking at an update on our remote synchronous learning. So the purpose here is to provide the trustees with a report, an update on the implementation and the progress of remote synchronous learning across the district. Over the summer, as we were mandated by the government in preparing for our return to school, all districts were asked to plan for a virtual and in-person as well as an adaptive mode of delivery to facilitate the transition between one mode to another. On August 13th, the ministry released PPM 164, which outlined for us requirements on implementation and reporting. As a district, we polled our constituents, we polled our parents to find out how many were intending to return in person and return in a remote learning. And based on the significant numbers of families opting for remote, we opted to appoint an administrative team, a principal, Krista Rakowski, and a vice principal, Mitch Blimke, as well as casual administrative support to oversee the programming aspect of remote synchronous learning. As opposed to establishing a distinct school with its own MIDAT number, we opted to attach our remote learning classes to existing schools. We launched on September the 8th with an introductory session that included myself, the director, the principal and vice principal, and a few days later, all students were up and running to full capacity. As we got started in September, you'll see in the report that we were serving just over 1,300 students, 951 in elementary, 375 at secondary, across the entire district. We also aimed at offering a full range of programs, certainly in elementary, and offered English programs with core French, as well as immersion and bilingual kindergarten classes. The breakdown for us were 30 English classes with core French and 14 French immersion classes. You will see that the numbers indicate that as we get ready for quadrimester 2, we have seen recently a trend where more parents are asking that their child return to in-person at elementary, so we'll see a decrease in the number of students that are in remote learning classes for Quad 2, and a slight increase at secondary. And you'll see that we've added some sections for Quadrimester 2 in order to serve our students to the best of our ability across all pathways. Students are scheduled with teachers from across the district. So unlike in their homeschool, we have classes where students come from a variety of schools taught by a teacher attached to their home school. The schedule is based on the teachers at the delivery school, so not necessarily your home school. So the example I'm going to give, if I'm a student at Herman Street, but the teacher of the remote class is at Killaloe Public School, my schedule actually follows Killaloe's Public School's schedule. So start time and end times. We have ensured that all of the requirements as outlined in the PPM 164 are met in the daily schedule, as well as our obligations under collective agreements with regards to prep time and duties and the likes. It has not been without its challenges. there have been some successes, and you'll see examples in a few minutes of some stellar examples of our success in remote synchronous learning, but there have been some challenges. The first one I'd like to highlight for you is the request for exemptions from synchronous learning. Effective as of the end of October, we had 60 requests for exemptions at elementary and 4 at secondary. As of this morning, the number at elementary has jumped to 63, so still fairly stable. Serving these students is challenging because they're not connecting daily to our synchronous learning platform. They're being served completely asynchronously. In some cases, they access their learning material through the Google Classroom, but in many cases, either for lack of connectivity at home or parents requesting a reduction in screen time, we are providing printed packages. And that certainly is an additional element that, as we were planning over the summer, had not necessarily anticipated a need for. At secondary, our students are being served through continuing education, and they're being provided printed packages and being monitored by the staff in continuing education, as well as student success teams in their respective schools. Certainly, another aspect that has been a challenge is attendance. The ministry has made its requirement very clear, but also in the spirit of ensuring that parents are in control of their child's educational experience, it is not uncommon to see some students logging in for a portion of the day and then sometimes not returning for another portion, and we're trying to accommodate parents and work with them as much as possible. But certainly the attendance piece has been challenging. We're very fortunate to have an outstanding IT team, and we're very grateful for their support, because Aspen, our student information system, was not designed to accommodate an in-person as well as a remote, with all of its idiosyncrasies, and yet we're making it work. But what we're realizing is every time we seem to come across what would be a simple task, it's never simple when you've got multiple delivery modes. Quarterly decision points. The report in front of you outlines that we will have accommodated roughly 308 requests at elementary for a switch in delivery mode, and 135 requests. But between the time that this report was submitted and next Monday, it is probably more accurate to say that we will exceed easily 500 requests for changes. And I think one of the learning out of this recent change in delivery mode is, while we fully recognize the importance of being responsive to parents' requests and parents' needs, we also need to weigh this against the operational impact of accommodating those needs in real time. And once we get beyond next week, we really need to think about the next quarterly decision point and whether we hold firm between now and that date. So, something to think about. As outlined in the report, our success are due to an exceptional teamwork effort of so many departments across the district. You see them outlined here, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I would say just everyone working in the district probably has had, in some way, shape, or form, a role to play in ensuring the success of remote synchronous learning. Last but not least, I have to commend everyone that's been teaching in this mode for their ability to create a sense of community. We know that building a community is an integral part of the learning experience, and developing a sense of belonging has been a focus in so many ways in the work that we have seen in remote synchronous learning. So I'll now introduce our outstanding admin team. I say outstanding because I feel that I will publicly apologize, because when I first called Krista, I probably should have asked her to sit down. Because I called her and probably surprised her with our desire to move in this direction. But both Krista and Mitch have been absolutely outstanding. They've been a great team. They have been responsive to the needs not only of classes, but of their entire staff. They host voluntary, what they call office hours. Really, this is a demonstration of their willingness to have an open door policy, an open virtual door policy, if I may say, to help staff along the way and to support them in achieving our collective goals. And if we've been able to accommodate students, parents in this venture, it is in large part due to the professionalism of our staff across all levels of the organizations, and especially the way Krista and Mitch have exemplified those attributes. So, Krista and Mitch, over to you to share some of the success stories of remote synchronous learning.
Okay, thank you, Renal. Thank you for those kind words. We're going to share, hopefully this is going to work for us. We're going to share a little slideshow that we've prepared to kind of summarize all of the great work that's been happening so far in remote synchronous learning. So Mitch has just shared that. Are you seeing what, Ronald, are you seeing the slideshow?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect. So we just wanted to start, and good afternoon. So we started our slide deck just with logos of all our schools. And as Ronald already explained, it really is an interconnected web. And part of the joy is we got to meet every staff educator, office admin, IT members, right across principals, vice principals, right across the county. And it takes many hands to make light work, and that certainly has been a combined effort to make the full launch that our online platform has. So Ronald already touched base on this, but just to show you the timeline and the speed that we implemented a remote synchronous learning platform. So PPM 164 came out mid-August. We were hired the second last week of August. We manually placed 1,300 students in almost 50 classrooms, in addition to 34 courses in high school. We launched with the rest of our school in-person learners on September 8th with a welcome session and tech orientation. And by that Monday, we were rolling with a 300-minute day like our in-person learners did. Phenomenal efforts by everyone at a very warped time speed.
For sure. And like Ronald was saying, building community is a very important part of our job and all of our teachers' jobs. And we've been working really hard to build community with people that we have never met before, and people that we can't just go visit in our building and check in with. So some of the things that we've done so far is like we have a weekly memo, a Monday memo that goes out every Monday morning with updates for both panels. Like Ronald said, we have our voluntary office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays for teachers just to touch base with us and get their questions answered quickly and do some troubleshooting. We have staff working with system coaches and our TELTs on a regular basis. In fact, we have a number of new staff starting with the secondary panel on Monday, the 16th, and I was just working with our TELTs this morning in regards to reaching out to those staff to get some collaboration going with people who haven't been part of our system yet. things that come our way. We share on a regular basis resources and different videos to help support our online staff. Our IT department, like Ronald said, has been fantastic in supporting staff in terms of the equipment that is needed that we weren't actually aware of when we first started. And our NTIP partnerships in assisting new teachers have also been very important to help build our community.
Sorry about that. So we just want to highlight some staff perspectives, and they're very similar to what we agree with as well. So regarding support, we had staff outline that other staff really came forward in person and other remote to collaborate and to have amazing support systems in place, just from the grassroots up. And we had a junior teacher really highlight developing classroom communities, having certain jobs, and highlighting what would happen in person can also happen in a remote synchronous learning classroom. And a real highlight coming from some spec ed background is we had our small class teacher share that we had some small class students having to meet other students of their ability from across the county that they would never come into contact with, and now they're friends outside with various social distance measures outside that online classroom. So students meeting people all the way from Deep River to Empire that necessarily would never connect in other means. So for sure, a great example of the benefits of this platform.
And we certainly can't share everything that came our way because we would be here for probably a lot longer than you'd like us to be. But a couple of other, I won't read the whole thing, but the first one here is from a brand new teacher, and really, really impressed with how his students, the community's been building in his students, and how students are supporting each other, as well as how students are rising to the challenge when challenges do appear, and being successful in overcoming those challenges. And then the last little quote we had, I thought was really well written, finding joy in little things, and how this teacher really appreciated being part of something new and ever evolving, and as part of her own learning as well.
So we had some, we asked our RSL teachers to share some examples of online work, and submissions from that. So like board initiatives or board celebrations, our RSL classrooms are also participating just like they would if they were in person. And oftentimes they're aligning with their home school or their virtual host classroom school to go through. So here are some examples that we shared, some student work.
And from the secondary panel, we have one virtual art course this quadmester. We're going to have two next quadmester. It's a very popular course, and just sharing some submissions from students of activities that they're working on, even though they're at home. And of course, the teacher being very creative in terms of what kinds of materials students would have access to, and really keeping that in mind when she's developing activities for her class. And then like I said, we have two new art courses next quad. So again, great teamwork. We have people at Mary Street helping us put together art packages, which are going to be delivered to students' homes about on the second week of the art course, so that they have access to materials that they need to complete activities, as well as resources from home.
So using a wise use of resources. So as part of our board initiative, Orange Shirt Day at the end of September, we had Tina Nelson, our F&I coordinator, participate in live group sessions remotely and share perspectives and talk regarding residential school survivors. And they had a neat perspective because that was able to reach those homerooms which would have multiple kids across from multiple sites. And here's as well as we have classroom celebrations and online spirits, and we have our grade 2s sharing all their their fun costumes for Halloween and their online celebration, just like they would if they were in person for school. And last but not least, for our this is a high school law class, and the teacher has introduced the Funny Friday activity where they do various fun activities. So in this case, they all have to, their pets joined for a portion of the class that day, which really brings up community spirit and keeps everyone motivated. So we're just going to mute here and then share the video, but Krista's going to introduce this educator.
Yeah, so this is Joy Pilgrim, and she's a teacher in Renfrew. I had the privilege of meeting Joy when I was a teacher myself. I remember at a workshop a long time ago, but of course, being in the other end of the county, haven't really had the joy of working with Joy much. So this has been really neat. Joy has, she's got a really great perspective on what it's like to be in the classroom and how it's evolved since the start of the school year. So because she can do such a great job of summarizing it, we're going to turn it over to her, and we'll share that with you shortly.
Good morning, my name is Joy Pilgrim, and I'm doing a remote grade 5-6 class this year. I was asked to talk a little bit about the process, so I don't think it would be a big shock to anyone if I told you that it was a pretty difficult startup. A lot of us felt really overwhelmed and uncertain about exactly what we were doing. And I think that's true for both the staff and the students. A lot of kids weren't quite sure how to connect efficiently or how to engage with this type of learning because it's new to all of us. We learned a few things back in the spring, but the idea of 225 minutes of synchronous learning each day was really overwhelming at the beginning. And I think there was a lot of hesitation, a lot of uncertainty. A lot of us spent hours and hours and hours trying to get it together. But in the past month or so, things have been a lot more positive, and I just want to share a few of those things with you. So I know that for some colleagues that I've been speaking to, and for myself as well, what really helped the most was just kind of taking a deep breath and letting ourselves relax a bit about the expectations we were putting onto ourselves, realizing that it wasn't necessarily all about who had the best digital techie stuff or who had the coolest Bitmoji classroom or the best drag and drop slide activities, but letting ourselves go back to the things we would do in a face-to-face classroom, concentrating on building community, checking in with mental health, making relationships with the kids a priority. And so we've started doing a lot more class chats about things like kindness, things like perseverance, growth mindset, gratitude. I have to share with you our thankfulness pumpkin, because when was the last time any of us adults thought about being grateful for opposable thumbs? But that's the kind of thing a grade 5 student comes up with, and it leads to great class discussion. I know also for my class, the best thing for community building has been read aloud times. The kids have loved having the stories, discussing them, asking questions about them, which of course is great for literacy, but has also been great for community building. Another suggestion that someone made to me and has been really helpful to me is the idea of supervised but not interfered with class chats. So on break times or on the first 15 minutes of lunchtime, I will mute myself, turn my camera off, and let the kids just chat as if they were in a classroom together. They know I'm still there. They know I need to keep it school appropriate, but it gives them a chance to talk to each other and just enjoy each other's company the way they could if they were in a classroom, because they really miss that too. The other thing that has helped is kind of relaxing the teaching expectations and realizing that just because we're remote doesn't mean that every activity has to be digital. So sometimes it's just as effective to use good old chart paper and sketch things out for them and go through a lesson building knowledge together, paper and marker, or use the good old whiteboard. We use the whiteboard a lot. Relaxed activities like this one was just, here are 10 letters. How many 3-letter words, 4-letter words, 5-letter words, 6-letter words can we come up with? So lots of spelling patterns, lots of literacy stuff, but also just relaxation and fun and talking together and coming up with things together. That's been really helpful in a lot of subject areas. So I've done being their scribe when they share their science learning, so individual research, and then building it together in class. Same back here, individual biodiversity research, and then print it off and classify it together, build our classification tree together. Even though we're not here in the classroom, we can still build collaborative knowledge and do projects in a different way. So some of those strategies have been really helpful, and just kind of taking a breath and not being so determined to make everything really high tech has helped me a lot.
All right. So, like I said, and Mitch agrees that no one can summarize it better than someone who's been in the experience. And Joy did a great job of that. So, we thank Joy for taking the time to put that together for us. Before we end our presentation, we just want to acknowledge, like Ronald said, the incredible amount of teamwork and support we've had from every department in the board. And just really appreciate it. We've learned a lot. We're continuing to learn every day. Like was said earlier, nothing comes easy. But from those challenges, we learn more. And before we end our presentation, the quote here, which we're not going to read, comes from a teacher acknowledging also the work that parents are putting in at home, potentially having multiple students, multiple children in their homes, all working online, and parents doing their best as well to support their children. And we've even had parents presenting in classrooms as part of different events. So it's been a great learning experience. We know we're going to learn lots more, and we're glad we have the team behind us and all the support we've received.
Questions? Mike?
Just one question. I don't know if this would be answered by Krista or Mitch or possibly Superintendent Cousineau. But Superintendent Cousineau mentioned there are parts of the county that have either slow connectivity or no connectivity, and as well as there's some people are preparing packages, which is very onerous, but they're doing it for certain students. And then he went on to talk about attendance. Now, I know both in elementary and secondary, there's always a group of students that we have difficulties having attend regularly prior to COVID. Now that we've been in COVID for a lengthy period of time, are the attendance challenges somewhat the same prior to COVID? Are they greater? If so, I'm sure they're dealt with differently, because it's not face to face. So I'm just wondering, overall, is the attendance issue with students having difficulty connecting, for whatever reason, greater, is similar, or lesser than with attendance numbers? Just
before I ask, I invite Krista and Mitch to comment. I think it's important to recognize that we've never experienced this before. So I think we need to be cautious about any attempts to compare to pre-COVID or even in the spring. This is a very different context. In the spring, we moved to an online platform, but it was made clear that whatever achievement results were on March 13th, it could not go down. This is a very different context, and the criteria for being marked present is pretty all-encompassing, and as long as a student is connecting, engaging with the work, they're considered present in that mode. And when we talk about the areas for students that have been exempted from synchronous learning, it's impossible to take daily attendance. So as long as they're responding either to a phone call, an email, and they're submitting the work, they're considered present. So I think the perimeters are so different that I'd be very, very weary of trying to establish any comparisons at this time. I don't know if Krista and Mitch wish to add anything.
I was just going to add that our procedures would be very similar if we were seeing high absenteeism for whatever reason. So the student is still attached to home school. So in that case, we'd rely on the principal and their school support counselors to engage with the family as well if our virtual teacher is having a difficult time touching base.
And I think the other piece too is what was referred to a few minutes ago in regards to what students maybe perceived as how this online learning was going to go based on what they experienced in the spring. So we've been working really hard and making good progress, in that respect in terms of it's not the same as it was in the spring. There are different expectations in terms of attendance and assignment completion. And, I think we struggled with that at the beginning, but our process has evolved. And like Mitch said, if we have some outliers, we certainly will follow up with home schools and provide support like we would if we were in person.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding secondary students and their courses. When it comes to that, are they, I know we're not comparing it to in-person learning, but are they equitable? And there's options there for students, like I'm meaning applied, academic, open courses, the variety of courses in grade 9, 10, 11, 12 that you select from. Is there options for the students, or is it set and rigid because of the remote synchronous learning?
There's definitely options. Sorry, was someone else going to speak to that before me? No? Okay. So there's definitely options in all levels. And we're offering the compulsories. We're trying to really make sure we offer those compulsories first so that the students have those when they do go back to the regular classroom. We have more sections this quadmester than last quadmester, so we have some electives as well, and we're finding that yes, we're offering a good variety of courses, and of course taking feedback from guidance counselors in terms of what students need, what their essentials are in terms of graduating as well.
We also have a whole platform of small class or exceptional learners for special education needs with a variety of supports that are, I think, 2 sites or yeah, two sites at the moment.
Change some of their course selections. But we are offering some courses at the applied level. We're offering some courses at the academic level, college level, university level, open level. So we really are trying to meet the needs of our students who have selected this option because they don't feel comfortable being in our building. Jacqueline, you probably want to add something?
If that's okay, I just, in terms of Nick, what you're asking, we did make it clear that we couldn't offer everything, but certainly the guidance counselors and Krista and the principals have done a very good job of thinking about what students need. And we had made a chart, a spreadsheet, looking at what courses grade 11s and 12s need, specifically 12s to graduate. Some courses we won't be able to offer remotely, like example, 4U physics. There's only 4 kids who need it. That even happens in our face-to-face schools. We can't always offer it. But we've done a lot of creative things in the background to think about how we could help, including first time this coming quad, we're going to be connecting some of our remote kids into some B-learning options so that they have that opportunity. And we actually have some face-to-face kids connecting in a remote class who would have been doing relearning, so they have options. So I think everybody is working very diligently to ensure that our students, their pathways remain open, that they're able to do that. Can't be everything to everyone, but we're trying. And we're also able to access traditional e-learning. We're also able to access TVO e-learning. So between that, continuing ed, e-learning options, video learning, regular course, we should have most people covered. But, you know, though sometimes there's an odd thing here and there that doesn't work out.
Thank you. It's almost like we have more flexibility now. Students have more options now to fit into.
Potentially.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, this was an extremely positive presentation. We had a regional meeting on Saturday. Trustees from the Ontario School Board Association from Eastern Ontario. And when I asked for board reports, Hastings Prince Edward must have had a very different presentation at their board, because they had a lot of issues. For example, some families, and this wasn't unusual apparently there, some families had 5 kids, and to try to get them all on devices and, you know, proper internet speed and all that sort of stuff was a real challenge. All I heard was negative from them on this. I guess where I'm going with this is there's apparently a pot of federal money available for expanding internet, perhaps cell service, whatever. And if we're all really happy, we may not get any of that money, which we probably need. There's probably some stories here we haven't heard. So I'm just wondering if perhaps the chair, vice chair, director meet with the county council, because I don't know how that money flows. That would be a question. Yeah, so if we had some sort of a strategy to get that money, because if we, you know, this is wonderful for me as a trustee, and I haven't had any phone calls. I haven't met any parents that are upset about this. So, you know, it looks like it's going extremely well from this. Director.
Through you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Chair, the committee structure, a couple of points. I think you raised some really good points around the connectivity. And as Ronald, Kristen, and Mitch all mentioned, despite the Herculean efforts that they've put in place, there are still challenges along the way that we're meeting, including paper packets for students where the need be. So we've got the issues that you're talking about. 2 points. One, interestingly, most recently, a federal announcement around broadband access to try and get 90% or to 98%, I believe, of the country connected. So that work on a national level is in play. Separate from that, and not so far back, but a few weeks back, we received some notice of a COVID-19 resiliency fund or grant parameter that applied to a few major areas. And the major areas were essentially upgrades to the air and water quality of schools to try and stay open and functioning during a global pandemic. But there was also a connection there, and I'll ask Superintendent Block to speak to it. There was a connection to technology infrastructure to also move our work along in the current context we're in. And all of that work, both the applications, which are due in short order, and the actual completion of the work before the end of 2021 is fairly quick. But there very much is that kind of work in play at the provincial level, and then of course at the federal level. And I'll just ask Steve to speak to the tech piece, because there is a window to access that, and I think we have a meeting tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow morning, on this very topic to mobilize our submission of a plan, because Trustee Shields, you're absolutely right, we're not entirely satisfied. Despite the amazing work we've done, we've still got work to do and better connectivity, and we also are in the spot where we've got multi-child families that connectivity issues remain, whether it's the device or the speed, those kinds of things. So those are all in play. But I'll ask Steve to speak to it much better than.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's kind of two different things happening here. One is the federal piece around internet access for people, which is, again, hugely important. I've told this story many times, but we're, I don't know, maybe 35, 40-minute drive to Canada from my house, and we can have one person on the internet at a time in our house because, it's just such spotty service and such a slow connection. So even being that close to the city, we're still experiencing that. So we know that that's a need across the county for sure. The other piece that Director Pafoni was talking about in terms of infrastructure pieces, there are a number of things that we've identified through IT that we're going to bring forward to put towards that plan. And one in particular is just phenomenal timing, because we've been having a lot of discussion about replacing the internet, the Wi-Fi access points in all of our schools. And of course, that's an extremely expensive venture, and we believe that they will qualify for that funding. So if we're able to make that work, that'll be a huge bonus for us, because we'll be able to use those funds to deal with that issue, which will free up other money potentially to allow us to do some different things and address some other issues.
But I often thought we put fiber all through Renfrew County. So, kids in Palmer Rapids have high-speed internet in the school. And when they went home across the street, they probably had no service at all. I often wondered if we had been in cooperation with the county, could we have tapped into their resources a bit? As we're moving forward with this, I'm wondering if there should be a partnership. Because, there's lots of businesses, lots of people are realizing now they don't need to live in Toronto to run their business, but they do need cell service and high-speed internet and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure the county and the municipalities are interested in providing that service. That's a question or a speech.
It was a rant, it's okay.
I think you're right. I think they will be looking at it too. And what's interesting is there's new technologies that are just kind of coming to the forefront. Elon Musk has been launching this system of satellites, right, to provide internet access, and they're in beta testing with that. And it's from what I've been reading, it's been going very well. I actually applied to be a beta tester. I haven't heard from them yet. So there's different things like that are happening too that should make it easier to provide better internet access to people regardless of where they are. So, but it's a good point.
And if this goes forward with OPSPA, Hastings, Prince Edward, and maybe some other boards, I think we need to be me too in there, to make that point. So I just wanted to clarify that as we move forward with OPSPA, where this goes and our priorities and that sort of thing. All right.
Trustee Shields, just before we change topics, just a huge thanks to Superintendent Cousineau, to Principal Rakowski and Vice Principal Blintley for their incredible leadership in this endeavor. We turned this on a dime not only coming out of the spring, but really heading into the fall. And they have been diligently at this day in and day out to make a difference for our students. And when I speak to colleagues around the province and some of the glitches that they're still encountering 3+ months into the school year, it's in no small part a result of these 3 individuals and others, of course, who've made all the difference for us in the smooth function of this. So thanks to Krista and Mitch and all for their efforts.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody for all of that. Thanks for having us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Director Buffoni, while you're still standing, I think we have a visionary.
You got it. I'll also take the front so I'm at least facing folks. Just a very brief update for the Board of Trustees regarding our visioning exercise. This one's an oral one, as there's no real update, to be honest, to the report brought to board on the 14th of January. Simply wanted to highlight a few pieces. The work of this committee, as opposed to the work at the elementary level, which, as you well know, we're in the mid-mark, really, this school year of a multi-year plan for expansion of programs and services at elementary. The work at the secondary level, just by the nature of logistics and the way the flow of the school year last year was going, really began with our students, and it was such a wonderful place to start. The irony of bringing this report back is that the real launch of the feedback from our stakeholders on the secondary school review was from our students to get us going on it through a thought exchange. And that happened and really came to a close as a launch about 45 minutes before we found out in March that we would not be returning after March break. So this next piece that John will show up, and I'll continue talking until he's got a chance to show this one particular graphic, and then we have a short video. But in essence, we would like this fall to resume the work around our secondary school review. Of course, it'll extend beyond our students. As a very brief reminder of some of the key elements, we did, through the work of the committee that began work close to a year ago now, we did highlight 5 or 6 themes or topics. Program pathways at secondary, student success initiatives, again, both very important in the context of how we think about our secondary sites and the elementary students moving up into secondary. We also had experiential learning opportunities, virtual learning experiences, which is even more pertinent now when we think of the move of whatever the next phase of public education holds for us. We also had a 5th topic or theme that was related to transitions to and from secondary school, which is a major topic that stakeholders mentioned when we had our committee work. And the last one was a category that was other. Anything else that any stakeholders felt we needed to address. So even though our rethink at the secondary level was interrupted last March, we would like to re-engage those conversations this fall. It ties beautifully to the cyclical review of programs and services with student success led by Superintendent Poirier that will be reviewed this year. So those 2 pieces will work in synergy. And we really think, coming out of the work on our strategic plan that we'll see a little later this afternoon, this work will fit beautifully in feeding some of the operational goals that we eventually get to coming out of that. So we're looking to resume that work this fall. We've re-engaged through Student Senate earlier this year, a few weeks ago, the relaunch of the Thought Exchange. You can see the one example here, and from Thought Exchange they do a series of metrics or analyses, and this one is just one that we were able to pull from the March 12th experience. So really interesting how the larger the word, the more times it was mentioned, and this was just literally maybe a half an hour to 45-minute brainstorming amongst the students of the Student Senate last year. And I'm just wondering how much this will now change when we look at relaunching this for this school year, and whether there'll be any change in the dynamic. But we want to keep that graphic because it was pre-COVID. That morning, no one in the room, including myself, knew where we were headed as a system. So it's a wonderful snapshot from a group of student leaders just pre-COVID, and we'll look at it post-COVID. So we've explained to Student Senate that we're going to relaunch this work. We will re-engage, and again, I'll ask John in a moment's time to show the video that Jaslyn and Hudson, as our student trustees, were so gracious to create for us. We'll relaunch that likely tomorrow through to the end of November to capture student feedback. And then, as I mentioned previously, we'll eventually reestablish over the course of this fall, winter, and spring the meetings at each secondary site that we had intended to have. As you'll recall, back in January, and it's some time ago, our goal was to invite each local trustee for their secondary school or schools to a meeting to hear what staff have to say on those 5 or 6 themes. There may be others that fall into that other category, but the idea here was to release our secondary staff, not only teaching staff, but it might be educational assistants, office staff, it might be the admin team, of course, president site, but the idea was to have a conversation, and we're going to look to find a way to re-engage that, to do it safely, to do it following all of the parameters that public health puts in place, but to find a way to get to our secondary sites as we had planned, to capture some of their thinking, then to bring it back to that committee that was in place to analyze that, and then to take it back out again to our regular stakeholder groups, our SEAC, our tech, others that are in place to get their feedback, with, of course, CAS being predominant, but also ACEs at the elementary level, so that they are aware of what it is being discussed at the secondary level, much like the secondary folk were a part of the elementary, to see what was coming up through the system for them. So the goal over the next little while is to work out whatever logistical plan that may take, even if it takes us a bit longer, to re-engage that conversation, and then to bring back to the Board of Trustees. I'm usually fairly clear on when I'll do that. That I'm not sure of yet, but it will be before the end of the current school year. It will just depend on how long these consultations per site take us, and it's important that, based on the work of the secondary branch of the visioning exercise group, that we do get a chance to speak to staff in secondary schools. That, to me, is a real non-negotiable. We've got to get to our staff to hear them out, to hear the points they have to say. As a few final comments just on this brief update, and happy to field any questions, and we'll also give the chance to show the video. There are definitely some tensions that we'll need to balance. The difference between what students need and what they like, or what we like to offer them, is a tension we have to balance. I think Superintendent Poirier put it well. We can't offer everything to everyone without becoming ineffective and inefficient. So there's going to be decisions we need to make along the way, and need versus like is one of them. That plays out, frankly, not only for students, it also plays out for staff. And what staff like to teach versus what we need them to teach is a tension that we will need to balance moving forward. Traditional versus progressive offerings is another balance that we'll need to manage. And the third, I would say, is a single versus multiple modes of delivery. It's also something we are most likely needing to balance going into the future. But I do come back, and I think Krista and Mitch spoke to it so well. Not only is this a time of challenge, but it's also a time of opportunity. There are opportunity windows here that we can capitalize on in funding, in approach, in philosophy, and perspective that will shape our secondary schooling for the future, hopefully as optimally as it can be. So having shared that, again, I'm happy to answer any questions, but did want to give a chance for Jaslyn and Hudson just to share the video segment that they will be sharing, released really coming out of this meeting to their classmates for the thought exchange. Thanks.
The RCDSB is currently seeking ideas and input from high school students and parents and guardians on a rethink at secondary level. what are your thoughts on potential changes to programs and/or services in secondary schools?
In addition to proving students with a solid foundation in literacy and numeracy, the RCDSB's main objective is to prepare students for future success through global competencies like critical thinking and problem solving, creativity and innovation, collaboration, communication, character development, and citizenship.
As a leader in public education, the Brantford County District School Board is continually adapting and evolving to meet the demands of a rapidly changing world in order to best serve the needs of students, staff, and school communities.
Click the link in the bio to complete the Thought Exchange survey and to provide feedback onto how RCDSB might rethink learning at the secondary level. The survey will be open until Monday, November 3rd.
That is our wonderful student trustees who will advertise this. Thought Exchange continues to tell me that these should not last more than 10 days. I continue to feel that that's really short, but in fairness to Thought Exchange, their perspective, having had experience on these, is that you tend to capture most of the ideas within the first 10 days. Everything else is simply a re-rating of existing ideas. So we've compromised, and instead of leaving it open for 6 weeks, we're leaving it open for what is the effect of about 3 weeks, not a week and a half, which should give our student body enough time over about a 20-day period to a 21-day period to engage should they choose to. And Thought Exchange does speak to the fact that even if you leave it open longer, it doesn't necessarily mean people will engage. They tend to take that on first blush. If they're really interested in it, off they go to put in thoughts and then rate them along the way. And students will be prompted once they engage to go back in and rate the thoughts of others. We will utilize that work towards the end of the month as we start to shape those school visits, however they take place, to share some of what students have said. I think our staff and we as a, not only a governance body as a board of trustees, but as a senior staff, need to hear the student voice and what it is that they're saying within that. So again, huge thanks to Hudson and Jasmine, and we look forward to the work. Happy to field any questions on our secondary school week.
Do you have any questions? Superintendent Block, can you tell us something about international education?
Okay. I have a very large stack of papers here, as you can see. And this is just the paper. It doesn't even include all of the web resources that we had to include to put this together.
We only have 15 minutes.
I'm going to talk fast. Okay. So basically, we're here looking for a recommendation and approval for our international education RCDSB attestation of readiness requirements for international students. And what that essentially means is that it's the federal government that has oversight ultimately as to who enters the country. But the way that they're dealing with international students is they're asking the provinces to put forth a proposal as to whether they're ready to accept students as a province or not. So that has started to happen. Some provinces have been approved already by the federal government. The province of Ontario has not. The province of Ontario has not yet put forward a proposal to say they're ready. What they did do was they asked all school boards, as well as private schools, to prepare these plans, which are quite lengthy and in-depth, as you'll see. And so I'm just going to kind of read through that process, if that's okay. So the purpose is to seek support for the Brantford County District School Board attestation of public health readiness requirements for international students, as well as a board resolution endorsing our ongoing participation in an international education program that meets current federal and provincial guidelines for the 2021 school year. In September 2020, a ministry memo was issued outlining the requirements that school boards would have to meet in order to be approved to welcome international students from outside of Canada for the 2021 school year. All school boards intending to accept students from outside Canada must have plans in place that include specific details about how they will meet provincial and federal criteria to demonstrate readiness. Our plans will be submitted to the ministry to facilitate provision of a recommendation to the federal government that K-12 public and private schools in Ontario are deemed ready to accept international students. To that end, this report will demonstrate the readiness of the RCDSB to safely welcome international students into our schools and local communities. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on international education around the world. The economic and psychological impact on families has reduced the level of engagement in international education globally, which I'm sure is not surprising to any of us. Travel restrictions related to border closures and reduced flight availability have limited the ability for international students to enter our country. In Canada, borders closed to travel March 18, 2020. International students with study permits approved prior to March 18 were provided an exemption. Students applying for permits after this date are not currently eligible to enter the country to study in Ontario. Due to travel uncertainty, 8 of the students planning to study in our district during the 2021 school year have canceled their plans. 1 student has deferred to 21-22. The remaining 3 students scheduled to join us this school year have deferred their planned arrival dates to early 2021. This is all assuming we get approved. MLI and their affiliate organization, Yes Canada, our partners in the international education program, have indicated that they do have a number of students interested in coming to the RCDSB should Ontario be approved to accept international students in the K-12 sector. So I'll just talk briefly maybe about an overview of the federal and provincial requirements. So these are the things that between Yes Canada, MLI, and us, we have to have in place to be able to accept students. So some of the overall requirements, districts have plans in place for robust case management and outbreak response consistent with local and provincial public health guidelines. Thank you to Brent and his team and everyone else who worked on that, so I can say we do. A quarantine strategy for international students and co-arriving family members, protocols for notification of local and provincial health authorities for 14-day quarantine, quarantine compliance, cases of COVID-19 infection, and communication protocols to inform the public of outbreaks. We must also have some key arrival requirements for school boards. So pre-arrival requirements are communicated. They have to be communicated to international students and include documentation outlining a clear quarantine strategy, the essential nature of their presence for learning. They must use the Arrive Canada app, and they have to have direct transportation from point of entry to the quarantine location. Key requirements for the 14-day quarantine period. Quarantine arrangements need to be in place for arriving international students prior, obviously. Daily monitoring of symptoms and compliance, communication protocols in place in the event of symptomatic cases or compliance issues. You have to ensure quarantine location provides suitable isolation and does not put vulnerable individuals at risk. And there must be COVID-19 infection control information and training. Post-quarantine requirements. So we have to have ongoing support for our international students with both mental and physical health, anti-racism, and COVID-19 related stigma supports in our schools and the community. Mitigation of social barriers to support student compliance with individual COVID-19 infection control practices. Some additional provincial requirements are that a board resolution approving an international student program that meets the current federal and provincial requirements for the 2021 school year. A COVID-19 test administered during or immediately following the quarantine period for both domestic and international students who have entered Canada within 2 weeks prior to the start of their studies. So regardless of whether they've quarantined or not, they must also be tested. The RCDSB International Education Plan, so it was also a part of this. The RCDSB has developed an international education plan which is attached to meet the federal and provincial requirements. This plan sets out the roles and responsibility of the RCDSB and our partners MLI and Yes Canada in meeting these requirements, including pre-arrival information for students, families, and host families, providing education and guidance around COVID-19 infection control, border, and travel protocols. Planning checklists and information for pre-departure, travel, and quarantine. Protocols for arrival, transportation to quarantine location, and host family agreements for provision of a safe and welcoming homestay environment. Protocols for monitoring quarantine compliance, tracking symptoms and supporting mental and physical health and wellness during the quarantine period, and protocols for continued international student support. So administer guidance and student support teams in schools, supporting the transition and ongoing monitoring health and wellness post-quarantine, provision of ongoing communication and up-to-date resources of COVID-19 to international students and host families. So once approved, the Renfrew County District School Board International Education Plan, attestation, board resolution, and all supporting documents will be submitted to the ministry for review. This review will facilitate provision of a recommendation to the federal government that K-12 public and private schools in Ontario are deemed ready to accept international students. This will open our borders to both registered international students and new applicants to the program. So we have a number of documents which I'm not going to read, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure that you understand what all the pieces need to be. So we have our attestation, and this is basically like a big long checklist that the ministry has given of all the things that we need to include in our plan. And if we receive an approval from the board, the attestation would be signed by the director. We have our international education plan, which addresses those same items. And really, these documents serve some, I think, very basic purposes, the documents that I'm going to show you in a second. You know, it's to alleviate fear, concerns for students, host families, schools, and communities, to support the safe travel, transit, health, and well-being of international students, and ensure students and host families manage this period safely and smoothly. So, of course, our priority, as well as the priority of our partners, MLI and Yes Canada, is that, you know, we really want to be able to welcome students, but we want to make sure that we do it in a safe way and that everyone's protected. So we have a number of appendices. We have our MLI document, which is for students, which is all the things that students need to do with all their checklists and everything else prior to leaving home, and what to pack and how to pack and all of those things. We have the MLI quarantine guide for their host families. So these are all the rules for the family they're staying with, the things that they have to have in place during the quarantine period and so forth. We have the document for MLI for the agents that they work with in the other countries, so that the agents know what they have to prepare the students and the families for. We have the Yes Canada student arrival package. Again, same as the MLI one, but this is the information for students to get them prepared to come, as well as the Yes Canada homestay package for families. And finally, we created our own attestation, which is something we're asking MLI Yes Canada, the host family, the student to sign, just indicating for us that they've met all of the requirements that have been laid out for them. They've satisfied the quarantine period. They've demonstrated that they've been tested and so forth. So,
Any questions? Oh, everybody's got a question. Marjorie.
I'd just like to ask Steve what he does in his spare time.
well, that's a better question for Sharon, because I'm going to be quite honest. She did the yeoman's work here and pulled all this together for us. So I really have to thank Sharon for that. Thank you very much.
Brian, and then Mike, and then Susan.
Perfect.
Or no, Nick. You want Nick to go first? Okay, go ahead.
I just had a question regarding the post-quarantine requirements. Like, we can put in support international students with both mental and physical health, anti-racism, and COVID-19 related stigma supports in schools and the community, but how are we going to actually act on that? I'm just worried with the district we live in, with this stigma around international travelers coming to Renfrew County, and that could create some stigma in our community, and how are we as a district going to protect and act on those students to ensure that there isn't stigma and there's more education provided to the community members and the students that they're going to school with.
Great. So I think, by and large, exactly the same way that we try and do that for all of our other students. So basically, all of the supports and services that we have in place in our schools for our current students are open and available for all of our international students when they come in as well. We do have becoming a welcoming school document that we prepared as well for schools, Nick, that kind of goes through different strategies that schools can employ to welcome international students, to make them feel connected and part of their school community, to partner them up with, other kids who can be kind of their mentor support network, things like that. So I think we've tried to have a variety of those pieces in place to support them.
Perfect.
Mike?
Compliment everybody, great presentation. I look at a presentation like this as if I had a teenage son or daughter that was going to go to another country to go to school internationally. After listening to your presentation, I would be, as much as I could, be put at ease. So that's how I look at this, and it's got a great package, but then it's also got the in-depth COVID requirements on top of it, very thorough. So, I mean, I don't think any stones left unturned that we couldn't do. And just getting back to what Nick said, I think that overall in Renfrew County, maybe I've got my head in the sand, I think we're generally a pretty welcoming bunch. And I think the principal and key stakeholders in whatever school they go to, they'll sort of take this international student under their wing for at least a period of time to make sure that they're comfortable and immersed. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation, Steve, and I did actually read some of the attachments. They are quite lengthy, I discovered, but very detailed, and I'm glad that they're there. Do you have a sense of how many other boards have accomplished this, have done this attestation? Like, where are we at provincially with perhaps being approved by the federal government?
Yeah, how many other boards? I think there was only, last meeting that I attended, there was a handful that had actually submitted, so there was still a large number that were yet to submit, including us. I think it's usually about every 2 weeks, I think, that the federal government is accepting these submissions. But in terms of when the province is going to be ready to bring that forth to the federal government, I'm not sure. We've heard different things. I think the province was maybe in discussions with the federal government to see if they would approve boards individually, which I don't think the federal government was willing to entertain. Am I going off track here, Sharon? Is this what you understand?
Right, yeah.
So there may be some things that are happening politically around some of this that will have to get worked out at that level. From our perspective, we just want to be ready so that, when and if we're able, that we're ready and able to accept students. I think we've had a very positive experience so far with students coming into Renfrew County, and we want to build on that. We were hoping to build on that this year. Of course, it was looking like our enrollment and those things were going up, but certainly COVID is a wrench in a lot of things.
But at least we're on board, so that's great. It would be nice if they could get it done so that you could have people come perhaps next spring, but maybe that's a dream.
Well, it is. It's a concern that we have, because it's a concern around the province, because we know other provinces have been approved and are now accepting students.
Yeah.
So are you going to wait for Ontario, or are you going to go to BC, right? So like, students have choice about where they go. So we'll see what happens, but.
So the sooner the better if we can do it, yeah.
Yes.
Pfizer has a cure anyway, so it's
Yeah, maybe.
well, anybody else, comments, questions? All right, we have a motion, and I've lost it, so I'll summarize.
Here.
We got a motion. Basically, what it says is we support the international education and we're following the rules. Anybody wish to make that motion? Mike, seconded by Nick.
Sure.
All in favor?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
And that's it
Thanks for your leadership, Steve.
That's it for student achievement and programming student achievement.
you have the gavel, Marjorie.
I'm sorry,
I think you have the gavel.
I have the gavel.
For equity, equity and inclusion, there.
I apologize, I wasn't even aware I was on, so I just put okay. Agenda here. Yes, I'll call to order this meeting of the Equity and Inclusion Committee of the Renfrew County District School Board on November 10th, 2020. We have only one item in this session, so not this heaviest program. But I know that everything that Superintendent Cousineau has to say is always very heavy, so I'm going to ask Superintendent Cousineau to speak to us about the Equity and Anti-Racism Strategy and Action Plan Board.
Thank you for the introduction. While there may not be several items on the agenda, I would say that it is an agenda item that is extremely important because it speaks to who we are and who we aspire to be as individuals and as a community. So the purpose of this report today and the presentation that will follow my short introduction is to provide you with a summary of the work ahead being undertaken under the leadership of our assistant principal, Amy Johnson, newly appointed this year to this role. To provide a little bit of perspective, back in 2009, the Ontario Ministry of Education released the Equity and Inclusive Education Strategy. That document recognized the need for concrete action and provided a roadmap to support the sector in ensuring high-quality education for all students. Ontario's Education Equity Action Plan in 2017 further outlined general and specific practices to be implemented throughout the system. Additionally, equity and inclusive education has been subject of several program and policy memoranda, bills, and a goal of the provincial vision document. Recent events locally, regionally, and across other jurisdictions have exacerbated the divide between those with privilege and those marginalized in our society. More than ever, as a school district, we must commit to a path of concrete actions that lead to systemic changes that will guarantee that all learners and employees flourish free of oppression. To guide this work, the district will develop its own equity and anti-racism strategy, along with an action plan and clear deliverables. It is our intention to consult with families of racialized students, past and present, to better understand the lived experience of their children in our schools. Our hope is to foster a culture of collaboration with those families and solicit their ongoing input as we strive to hold ourselves accountable to our commitments. In the Education Equity Action Plan, the work is organized in 4 areas: school and classroom practices, leadership, governance, and human resource practices, data collection, integration, and reporting, and 4th, organizational culture. You had part of your package, well, I believe it was in the additional link sent today, I have a copy of a resource, and I won't speak to it because I know Amy will, that we put out to schools probably early October-ish, and this was certainly inspired by a document that was shared with us by the York Region District School Board. They have a pocket guide to respond to discrimination in their schools, and we did obtain permission to adapt some of the content, essentially rebranded for our purposes. I need to be honest and transparent. If we're going to do this work, it is hard work. The work is disruptive by nature, but it is necessary work if we believe in the universality of human rights. I'm going to call upon Amy to give us an overview of some of our preliminary thinking. We can't do it all in 1 year, so we will have to stagger the work over several years, but there is already work underway, and we will continue to build over the years. Amy?
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John. You've got that going. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'd just like to start by acknowledging that the land that we're on, both here at Obiango as well as virtually, is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. And I would also like to recognize the enduring presence of First Nation Métis Inuit people. So thanks very much for having me. You can go ahead and click the slide there, John. So Ronald mentioned human rights, and this little word cloud represents a little tiny bit of thinking that the central team did at the very beginning of the school year. So you can see human rights is right at the center of it, and basically we all have the human right to come to school and to come to work and be free of discrimination. And all different types of discrimination occur, as Ronald said, locally, provincially, nationally, and of course, internationally. It's been quite a movement lately. So you can see up there all of the isms, racism, sexism. You can see all the phobias, transphobia, Islamophobia, homophobia. You can see issues around religion, creed, gender identity. And those are all of the things that we're going to be working to make improvements in and to guard against within our system as we move forward with this work. Certainly, the idea of identity is one where we're not all just one thing. We are all made up of different identities, and we identify in different ways, and you can see some of those ways based on that word cloud. And certainly at the very beginning of the school year with our central team starting into the health and safety modules, and the newest one that was created for equity and anti-racism was phenomenal conversation, even though it was just a brand new year and a brand new team. That word cloud went into the NTEC training package this year for our first year teachers. Go ahead there, John. So basically, on the word cloud, you saw two different words in there about unlearning and learning. So there's a lot of talk about what we have to unlearn as a system. We have to start to unlearn some of our privilege, some of our bias, and some of the status quo of doing things the way they've always been done. And that unlearning has to happen before we can get into some of the learning to make our system better than it is now. Go ahead, John. So this is what Ronald was sort of referring to. This is just a very basic timeline over about the last 10 years in terms of the Ministry of Education. Ronald referred to both this 2009 document and this 2017 document from the ministry. And he also mentioned that there's been a wide number of guiding documents in the interim. Two sort of pivotal new pieces of legislation over that last decade. First one being in 2012, the Ontario Safe and Accepting Schools Act. And the most recent one being in 2017, Ontario's Anti-Racism Act. Okay, so those are law now. And along with that, various PPMs and ministry documents that have come out in the interim. And that's sort of what's going to guide our work forward. And as Ronald mentioned, in the most recent 2017 Ontario Action Plan, they distilled the work down into those four categories that Ronald mentioned. Data collection, basically data collection, organizational culture, school and classroom practices, and then leadership, governance, and HR. And John, you can just flip ahead to the next one as well. So you can see those four areas from the Ministry Action Plan down the left-hand side. And across the top, just four sort of other really broad, each of them are very, very broad umbrella areas of work. So we sort of talked about them in terms of race, identity, which is huge because, as I said, we all have different identities. We may identify with a certain gender. We also may identify with a certain religion. And then we have two different identities, and we have lots more than just that. Socioeconomic, we know that poverty is a pretty big issue in Renfrew County, and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit education. So those are sort of four umbrella categories that we want to start the work that the province is asking us to start. And I thought I would just take you through a few that we're hoping to start this year, some of which have already been started. So the first one is that we're going to be putting together a grant proposal to the ministry. It's due at the end of this month to start our data collection. The Anti-Racism Act requires that school boards collect data on the identities of all of our staff and all of our students prior to the end of the 2023 school year. So to that end, they have some funding that's available to us, and we are working on a proposal right now. There's different stages to the funding. Boards can choose to start either with just staff, just students, or both, and they can also choose to ask for funding to help support just the planning and the work around the work that it's going to take to get fulsome data for all of our staff and all of our families about their identities, because it's information, as I'm sure you can imagine, that is asking questions of us of what all our identities are. How many, like what's our socioeconomic status? How do I identify with that? How do I identify in terms of gender, sexuality, creed, ancestry? And you can choose in the example that the ministry gave us to work for in terms of the proposal, you can choose many. So for example, if you say, what is your heritage, choose as many that fit for you. You can imagine it's Caribbean, South African, Northern European, Southern European, all of it, right? So back to the funding, we can choose to apply for funding just to prepare on how we're going to do that census across our system, or if we want to choose to apply for more funding, which means we will need to prepare for it and collect it within a certain time zone. So that's something that we're going to make a proposal to the ministry for. Under school and classroom practices, we have quite a few. We are going to start a review of resources now across the system, K to 12. That's a pretty big job of taking a look at all of our resources and asking ourselves, are they culturally responsive and relevant to our students? Under identity, we're looking towards strengthening and improving understanding and bridges with the LGBTQI2S communities. Been working closely with the plant department lately. One thing that we already have on order are gender-neutral washroom signs. Those are to be coming in the next week or two, and we'll be delivering those out to the schools and sites that don't yet have them. Under socioeconomic, we're starting to look at different system-wide projects that we can do to remove or address economic barriers of students in our schools. So just started some conversations with Jen and the finance department. And we'll be talking to other boards who have put in projects for menstrual products for all girls free of charge at all school sites across the district. And some larger school boards, much larger than ours, have managed to do it, so I think we can too, but we're just at the beginning stages of those conversations. And under FNMI initiatives, we're looking at, we've had for many years now in the district, the grade 11 college English course has been the First Nations, the Native Studies English course, and we're looking at beginning conversations to broaden that so that all of our students in grade 11 get their English credit in grade 11 through the Native Studies course documents. So that would be workplace, college, and university. We've started some of those conversations with schools as well. Last one there, and the arrow is kind of bridges over school classroom practices and governance and HR, is this document. I brought some if anyone wants to take a look at it. Or you can, do you have it in your package? Yeah, you do? Yeah. Okay. So as Renaud said, we have that out in schools now. Of course, what will bring it more to life and sort of activate it is the conversations that are going to go along with it. I have started to be asked by some schools to come and speak to it at staff meetings and stuff like that, but essentially we're looking for the common language that you see on that document. If and when there are acts or words that are discriminatory, here's what we are going to do as our district. We're going to address it. If we don't address it, we're allowing it. So we're going to address the behavior, we're going to name the behavior. If it's Islamophobic, we're going to call it that. If it's anti-Indigenous, we're going to call it that. If it's sexist, we're going to call it that. Okay? We're going to support the person or group who's being targeted. We're going to hold the person or group who is doing the discriminatory act or words accountable. We're going to educate, educate, educate. And then we're going to try to restore school culture and climate if and when damage has been done as a result of those discriminatory words or actions. So it's just a one-pager in this format, but the conversations that are going to occur around it are going to be rich. And again, at another lead teacher training, I was asked to speak to this, and the lead teachers in the elementary panel were very engaged in, what they would do if there's a homophobic or racist slur, for example, on the schoolyard in their role as lead teacher, and they found this helpful as a guiding document. So we're hoping to move forward with that. Sort of skipping under to the bottom one under leadership, governance, and HR, what will probably fall out of this and what we will be looking to do or begin doing is if, as a result of a discriminatory act or words or slur, there are concerns or matters that are brought forward to the HR department, for example, involving anything under the Human Rights Code, we'll be looking to flesh out what that process looks like and formalize it a little bit more. Secondly, we will be looking to create a specific and explicit anti-racism strategy for our board and start to look at APs that are related to that in our board through an equity and anti-racist lens. That will take some time. That won't be done before the end of this school year, but we'll get started on that. And then organizational culture change. All of the things we've started on and are going to hopefully follow through with this year, they span those 4 umbrella areas. So we are looking towards establishing equity leads in all of our schools as a liaison for communication and information. We have created a system calendar for all of equity dates and events. And if you want to pull that up, John, I'll just show a couple of things. So, for example, we know that last week was Treaties Week. And so if you go onto the equity calendar, which all employees of our school board now have access to, and if it was before Treaties Week and I'm a classroom teacher and I want to know what resources I have available to me, they can click on it. I think you can still click on it, John, Treaties Week, right up at the top. It starts on the 2nd. Oh. It's in the light orange. That's why it's not. Okay? So if you click on that, you can see, so the bottom Google Doc there, John, if you click on that, whoops. That's okay. So that's our Renfrew County District School Board summary of resources put together by Tina Nelson, the Indigenous Education Lead. So that's one really good resource. If you can flip back, John, we also linked under there to basically resources for Treaties Week from the provincial government, the Ontario government, as well as the federal government's document of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action to schools. So yeah, so you can see there. So teachers can go in, they can look up the calls to action, they can look up the provincial government's resources, and they can look up our district's resources put together by our Indigenous Education Lead. We have Louis Riel Days coming up later this month. And once again, teachers can click on the resource under Louis Riel Day, put together by the Métis Association of Ontario, and use those resources for their classroom teaching. John, I don't know if you could just flip ahead to like February for me. One we all love, February 24th, if you could click on Pink Shirt Day there. Pink Shirt Day, click on Pink Shirt Day, organization. There you go. Teachers can pull that up. They can click on resources, middle, top, middle. Yeah, and then bottom left is resources for parents and teachers. Okay? So we don't have all of the links in the equity calendar yet, but we're working on it, and we're hoping to get the ones in ahead of the months as they happen. So that's something that we're excited about, and it's filtering down into the classrooms for teachers to be aware of. But everybody has the access to that across our system. Okay. What's my next one? Strengthening relationships and bridges with parents and community groups. Oh, just back one more, John, thanks. So Ronald mentioned that as well. We will be doing some outreach work with parent groups across our system, in particular parents of marginalized students and families. I've been invited, here's one way it's already started, to the Pembroke Mayor's Roundtable on Diversity. Very fascinating group. They've met once so far, obviously with the purpose of improving the conditions for all of the community members, all of the citizens of Pembroke and surrounding area. So the focus wasn't on school, but there's a very clear link between the community and the schools. There were several, I would say 5 or 6 graduates from our system. They spoke openly about their experience in our schools. And there were many parents of students either who have graduated or who are currently in our system, both systems in Pembroke. And so that's an interesting outreach as well. And some of our work will have some contacts from that area in our county through that Mayor's Roundtable. The next meeting for that's coming up a little bit later on in the month. And lastly, to start some organizational culture change, we have a few things PD that's going on. Of course, there's not a lot that's as much available to us during COVID times, but the 4 big questions slide, John, which is one you flipped to already. So this is, it's called 4 Big Questions. It's happened twice now. It's a speaker series. It happened once in this 3 times, sorry, thank you. Once in May, once in the summer, and once just finished in the fall. And they're for educators whose career work really has been in equity and anti-racism. And they, for over a series of 4 weeks, so this last one I participated in, it was Thursday evenings, and they take a question. So I think this one was from the summer, but what are the biggest barriers to racial justice in education in Ontario? And on one Thursday night, that's the question they talk about, the panel talks about it. And so in our system, over those sessions, we've had, I think, upwards of 75 staff, K-12, elementary, secondary, central staff, teachers, coaches, EAs, ECEs, superintendents, the director, I think was in one, be part of some of that PD. So that's something, and I believe there's people asking me when's the next one, so I'm hoping there is a next one because more teachers want to get on board for that. So, and my last slide is just to say thanks for having me and see if anyone has any comments or questions.
Make some questions, David?
Yeah, I'm sure you can answer this, but when a student comes to us in junior kindergarten, are they racist already? Or do they learn this, as they go along?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in this, but I would say that some very young students, there's actually some PD is around early learners coming to us with some learned behaviors that can be racist or sexist from their homes.
Does the program sort of say, this is what we're going to do in grade 1, and this is what we'll do in grade 2? Is that how
Yeah,
or is it going to be repeated every...
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we have a resource that was shared with us with another board that was around Halloween. So we shared that out to the system recently around Halloween costumes and the difference between appropriating somebody's culture or being appreciative in your Halloween costume. And I had a kinder team actually in a Renfrew school reach out to me and say, this is so awesome you just sent this out because we just had this really, really bad but really good learning conversation in my kindergarten class. Can you come and talk to us a little bit more about that, you know? But, you know, kids teasing someone else about what they were wearing and so on. A boy was wearing a dress, I think. And it got into a very, very deep conversation at the kinder level, so.
And if I may just add, I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is to move away from a definition of racism that is anchored in a good-bad binary. We need to get beyond that. Racism, I've come to appreciate, is a very complex social economic system. And we need, sometimes what has happened is, in the past is people say, no, my intentions were good, I'm a good person, I'm not racist. We need to move beyond that and appreciate that sometimes some of the structures that are in place are designed to actually to empower some and disenfranchise others. I think of the Indian Act, for example. It was clear that the Indian Act was an attempt to disenfranchise a portion of our population and to benefit a dominant group. There are many, many examples in our society, and some are very obvious, others not so much so, but we need to deconstruct those experiences and move away. I've come to appreciate, and I think I may have mentioned this before, in my own journey, when I read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, I walked away from that book and my biggest learning was I would never say that I'm not racist anymore. Because sometimes what I do, unbeknownst to me, may be supporting racism, a systemic racism. So I need, and it's not because I'm a bad person, I need to be in a learning stance and be willing to unlearn, as Amy said, and readjust to make sure that we get to a point where hopefully none of our students and none of our staff and no members of our communities are confronted with oppression, with systemic oppression.
Thank you. There were some very wise comments on the question. Next question from Susan.
Yeah, but just lots of great work, Amy. You've got lots to do, lots ahead of you, that's for sure. On the OPSPA call on Saturday, we actually had some information from Limestone about their equity plan, and maybe you've seen a draft. It's going to their board, I believe, this Wednesday. So if you haven't seen it, it might be taking a look at. But they've actually Pino has a copy of it. They actually have done a little bit of PD work with their trustees as well on this whole topic of equity and inclusion. And I'm wondering if you might kind of think about that down the road and include that in your thought processes. I think they had some good readings that might even be helpful to start us on that journey. And you know, even think about how you might integrate that into your plan as well. I love that. Thank you.
Nick.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Amy. I'm really glad to see the Google Calendar actually, because then it provides resources for teachers just to go on there, log on. From my limited experience working in the classroom, often teachers are scared to talk about those things because they aren't educated enough and they don't feel comfortable. For example, I worked in an Indigenous school last year. The teacher was not Indigenous, so she didn't feel comfortable talking about Indigenous issues, but 90% of our students were Indigenous. So having that resource there accessible for students, especially, or accessible for teachers, is so important. And it's not just for Indigenous, it's for everyone. And to Dave's point regarding the kindergarten coming in, are they born racist, I think, or do they come to JK racist? Or I think that it depends on the society, and I think that children as young as I was working with this year, I was talking about last week, 4-year-olds were saying derogatory words because they learned it from somewhere, but they have no idea what it means, but they think the term gay means stupid. But then they say, Nick, what is gay? And I'm like, am I supposed to have a conversation with them? Or is that the parent's job? Where I was working at the time, it was the parent's job. But it should be the teacher's job as well.
Yeah, very interesting, and I'll just comment very briefly on your idea about comfort. Renald started by saying a lot of this work is rooted in discomfort, And we have to start to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. I was a career high school English teacher. And, was I born in Elizabethan, 16th century England? No. Did I learn about it and learn how to teach Shakespeare? Yes. So do I have the capacity to learn about and teach about another perspective that I'm not as familiar with now? Yes. And that's the uncomfortable position I have to be able to go to.
Mike?
Just following up on what Renal said, my awareness, my knowledge, I think in this area is increasing, but I would still consider it quite minimal, like a layman. But, I've heard that, some people grow up, and I hear the term loosely coined, white privilege. So, I was, as a youngster, this would have been totally foreign to me. I just grew up in this bubble. But in the last 5 to 10 years, it's really come to the forefront, and I've been listening. I really think that Susan brought up a good point. There may be some trustees throughout the province that feel like I do. It's like, I listen to people like Marjorie, Renal, and yourself now immersing in this, and I go, wow, there's vast amounts of information. I think I might know some of it, but I really don't feel that I know it. I'm sort of behind what I feel is a big learning curve in this topic. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure everybody has feelings about this and thoughts about it. Any more to be expressed today? I could add that there was a reason I asked to be chair of this committee, and I'm not going to go into that now, so relax.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Amy for taking on this job in a totally new field for our board, and I think that Pino has some words to say on the same topic.
Just a huge thanks to both Renal and Amy for their leadership in this work. It is humbling, and I agree with Mike, I'm very much on the front end of a learning curve, I think, on a lot of this, and an ability to reflect back on myself as well in that experience. So I really want to thank Renal and Amy for taking on this great work and important work for our district. And I'm excited moving forward because keeping it in a growth-oriented learning stance will help us all move forward as a system. So again, huge thanks to you both.
Thank you. Ends the business of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, so the committee meeting is now adjourned.
Okay, thanks, Marjorie. I don't believe that we have Leo with us today, so I'm going to chair the finance committee, which is pretty straightforward. But do we want to take a 10-minute break, maybe? So we'll come back at 10 after 3 and be underway. Thank you.
I don't know if you noticed, Dave, in that body in
every year this time of year, we have to bring before you committee prep for the December meeting when we have the renewal opportunity with respect to the chair, vice, and the committee appointments. We have helping us the benefit of Policy 10, your policy. So if you go check on our site, Board Policy 10 lists all the board committees that we have right now. We also have a document, I believe, Vice Chair Morris will be circulating after this meeting, inviting all of you to declare your interest, either stand or to run for another committee. So he'll be asking for you to indicate that, and that'll be submitted, I believe, by next week. Is that correct?
Either
or
physically at the board meeting or prior to that electronically.
So you'll indicate on that document what your intention is with respect to the committee that you want to favor. And as I said, I encourage you to look at Board Policy 10 on the site. It clarifies all that. I will note there is one, the Pathways Committee. That was one that we did have, but last year, midway through thereabouts, we had a wrap-up meeting, and we had Trustee Shields and Trustee Morris on that, and the work of that came to an end. We concluded that over the course of many years, and now it's been embedded and will be parceled and incorporated in other aspects through Superintendent Cousineau's efforts as well. So that's one that just don't mark yourself down for that one. With respect to the process by which we go about the December meeting, it's another benefit of our policy. Board Policy 9 outlines the steps. The meeting will be handled at the outset through the Director of Education. He will convene the meeting, call for individuals to stand for chair. Trustees may nominate an individual. Then we have ask if they want to stand, if they wish to stand. If they do, their name is put forward. The trustee who nominates is able to have 1 minute to deliver remarks on behalf of why that candidate should be in the position. The person who's standing has 3 minutes to state their case. We have a voting opportunity then. The director will appoint 2 scrutineers who are not trustees. In the years past, it's been myself and Shelley. Likely will be the same. By ballot, we count them. If there's a tie, we have a runoff from all the candidates. The candidate with the lowest votes is dropped. We have the remaining. If there's a tie, we draw lots. So that's the process by which we elect the chair. Once we have that individual in place, the meeting becomes theirs, and then we go through the committee appointments in a very similar process, unless through the efforts of this solicitation through Vice Chair Morris, you guys come to a place and space where you've agreed to those committees beforehand, and we don't need to. So it's fairly straightforward, or it should be, hopefully. If there's any questions about the process, you may obviously talk to the chair or vice or myself if you have any questions, but I encourage you to look at the board policies for those directions and steps.
Maybe if I could just mention, so the trustees will be familiar with kind of this chart that I think was sent out other years. So it's the one that Brian will send out or I will send out. And if you could just put in, your top half dozen choices, that would be really helpful. And I'm glad to see that Trustee Birch is virtually online with us, because this will be certainly new to her. And we look forward to that. And you'll also see on the chart that it does capture where some positions are already allocated. For example, on the audit committee, the chair of finance and resources is already on that committee, but we have 2 other additional trustees. And on RCJTC, the consortium, again, the chair of finance is already on there, plus 1 other trustee. So you'll be able to see that on the chart. So if you could. So you've got a couple of weeks to do a little bit of thinking on that. Any questions or comments? Or sorry, Mike.
I remember that from last time.
Okay, good. But to remember where the trustees are, they're all over here, so this makes it easier. Okay, great. Yes, Dave.
There seems to be always confusion about the OPSPA director and voting delegate. So is that clear?
I've got them both on here.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
I've got the OXPA director, the alternate, a voting delegate, and the alternate. Okay, so I think we've captured it finally this time. Okay, I believe at this point we need to move into closed session. Could I have a motion, I have a mover, certainly, thank you, Trustee Shields, a seconder, Trustee Morris. All in favor of moving into closed session?
I have a question from last session.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just wondering if we can do a better job this year at making the committees more fair. Those of trustees who sit on like 4+ committees